Hello and welcome to Cinemate, and this is my review for Aquaman. Aquaman is the sixth film in the DCEU and the first live-action Aquaman movie to hit theatres, and the first DCEU movie to hit $1 billion. You heard me right, Aquaman has made more money than Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman or the Justice League. It's crazy. 5 years ago, Aquaman was the character everyone made jokes about, the guy who could just talk to fish, and now he's a $1 billion film. It's bizarre. And don't get me wrong, this film is good. It's highly enjoyable. But this movie making $1 billion? It seems insane. Like I said, this movie is enjoyable. If I had to describe this movie, I would say it's fun. Everything about this movie is fun. The actors seem to be having fun. The director seems to be having fun. And the movie itself is fun. This is no longer Zack Snyder's dark and depressing DCEU. And I think that works well for this film. There are still dark aspects. But in the comics, Aquaman is a fun character, an extremely goofy and wacky character, and this film embraces that side of him. And it was definitely the right choice. If DC continued to give individual directors their own style, I think it would work best for this universe. So this is the third time we've seen Jason Momoa as Aquaman, and I'm finally sold on him. He's fun to watch and he's extremely likeable. But this film makes him more than just a surfer dude, and he's way better than he was in Justice League. In Justice League, he seemed pretty invincible. He could do almost everything and nothing really hurt him. But in this film, he seemed far more human. And that's a good thing. You see him get shot, you see him get stabbed, and it makes it easier to relate to the character when he actually seems like he has weaknesses. You see the transition of Aquaman from Justice League, the kind of lone wolf surfer guy who's a bit somber, to more of a fun character who's accepting of his place as a king and as a hero. So although he wasn't great in Justice League, I think the transition from Justice League to Aquaman worked well, and it was quite effective. The rest of the cast was good. They all fit in nicely to the world that was created. This movie has two villains. One is Ocean Master, and he's the kind of stereotypical over-the-top villain. He works fine, but the actor's kind of hamming it up. I think it works for the film, but the other is Black Manta. His story in connection to Aquaman is probably more interesting, but he has less to do. But it definitely will be exciting to see what happens with his character going forward. The villains in this film stand out more than the other villains in the DCEU because these characters actually have a personality and distinct characteristics. They aren't just big, dull, grey monsters. The other great thing about this film, compared with the other DCEU movies, is the action. This film has really interesting action. Most DCEU movies feel like big CGI people hitting each other with no real stakes or impact, but this movie took things in another direction. The underwater stuff was really unique and utilised the environment effectively. It felt like superhero action that we hadn't really seen before. And the out of water stuff was choreographed well, shot well, and it felt like it had impact, and by far the best action in the DCEU and one of the strongest points of this movie compared with most superhero movies in 2018. You can tell the director James Wan was having fun with the budget. There are fantastic, unique, beautiful shots, and he creates a world that feels epic and large scale. But this is also part of the problem with the movie. Due to this extremely large scale, there's so much going on and so many plots that at times it bogs the movie down. This movie is constantly going from A to B to C to try and get something for D to do E. And so the pacing moves quickly, but there's just a lot to pack into the small amount of time that a movie has. There's Aquaman looking for a trident, him and Mera's love story, learning about Aquaman's past, Aquaman's story with Black Manta, Aquaman's story with Ocean Master and Black Manta's connection, stories about his parents, the origin of Atlantis. There's parts set in Italy, Africa, Atlantis and other underwater kingdoms. There's so much more, I can't even remember it all. There's a lot here and it feels like it could be trimmed down. Now, I think that adventurous swashbuckling tone works well, and the large scope is needed to make this movie feel otherworldly and epic. But I think some things could have been simplified. Maybe it's due to the two villains, I'm not quite sure, but there's definitely too much going on. Not only is the plot messy, but it's weirdly familiar. Parts of this film feel like Black Panther, other parts feel like the first four, other parts feel like Thor Ragnarok, and even a bit of Moana with a female who can control water and a big muscly guy looking for weapons. So although there are some very original action set pieces, the main plot feels familiar to things we've seen before, and most of those things are better versions of this movie. One positive about the story, I think, is the way that it deals with Aquaman's origin. It does so through flashbacks that are always relevant to the situation, and it doesn't make the movie feel like an origin story, but it explains the origin well to the audience, and I think that was very effective. Now, film set with an underwater kingdom is obviously going to have a large amount of special effects, and I think the special effects in this film are very hit or miss. The effects of the actors underwater is good and believable. The way they move, the way bubbles appear when they talk, or the way that their hair floats behind them. It all looks good, and there are some beautiful shots. However, some other things don't look great, such as some of the CGI creatures or the de-aging used in certain scenes. It doesn't ruin the movie, but at times it is very noticeable. Atlantis, the underwater kingdom itself, it looks great, it's visually impressive, but it does have that feeling of emptiness. You only really see it and you don't properly go in there and understand how the city works. It feels more like Asgard, this kind of great looking hollow city instead of Wakanda, which felt like a world that was lived in and you understood how it ran as a society and how people live there. But this could always be explored in sequels. There was so much going on, adding time for Atlantis would have pushed the movie over the edge. The way Atlantis is portrayed doesn't really detract from the film, but it doesn't add to it either. The other mixed aspect of this movie is the tone. Now, although this movie is fun from start to finish, each act seems to have a vastly different tone. The start is more somber and a bit darker. The middle becomes like a cheesy 80s action movie and has a swashbuckling adventure tone, and the final act feels large stakes with Lord of the Rings massive battles and crazy mythological creatures. The changing tone and the amount of things going on makes the movie feel like 3 films in one, and all of these movies were interesting, but they don't blend well together. The only real full negative I have about this film is the choice of music. At times the score was dramatic, other times it was cheesy. Someone would fall over or get hit and it would basically go wah wah wow. And at other times there was a cover of Total Africa by Pitbull and it felt so out of place. Like the plot, the music was all over the place. But at least the plot is fun while the music is just awkward. Overall, Aquaman is fun from start to end. It has extremely likeable characters, fantastic action and an epic sense of adventure that is enchanting. At times there's a lot going on and it plays it safe with no deep themes or much substance, but you really can't help but enjoy yourself, and overall Aquaman is definitely a good solid film. Although there's a few plot issues, it's almost impossible not to enjoy yourself with this movie, and it's definitely a step in the right direction for the DCEU. It makes me excited about DC again, and I can't wait for Shazam. If you enjoy adventure movies or superhero movies, I think you'll definitely enjoy this film. However, if you're looking for some of the deeper, more groundbreaking superhero films with layered characters and fantastic villains like we've been getting recently, this isn't one of them. But sometimes it's nice to just have a classic, fun, light-hearted superhero adventure, and there's nothing wrong with that. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you liked the video and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. Hopefully you can hear this video sounds a little bit better than normal. I left my normal microphone at home where I was staying for Christmas, so I needed to buy a new one quickly, so I went for a better mic, so hopefully the sound quality has improved. That's part of the reason why this review is so late into the year after I actually saw this movie, but if you follow me on Twitter at Cinema's channel, you'll see my thoughts on films as soon as I see them, so feel free to follow me there for more up-to-date updates from me. As always, thanks for watching Cinema's, and more videos coming soon.